Hello, thanks for coming. Subscribe if you're enjoying. And today I'm going to go through barrel wraps and purity seals on my Space Marines. So you see here, this is the Intercessor Captain that I was working on at the time, and got inspired by him because he's got a barrel wrap around his bolt rifle with a little purity seal on it. So I thought, right, I'll give that a bit of a crack. So this green stuff that I've got here was mixed maybe an hour and a quarter before actually making this barrel wrap that I'm doing now, because I did all the fur and things on the Captain. So don't use fresh green stuff for this, because for this process in particular, you don't want any stickiness in it for how you're going to show me move it around later. So, apologies for the table wobbling, but it's a fairly vigorous action you're doing on the table here to roll this like little skinny sausage out. So, preparing the table, I've just stuck some parchment paper down, a little layer of Vaseline on it just to take the stickiness out, and this paper's been used for putting a lot on for the previous fur and things I've been doing, so it's getting a bit battered now, but still perfectly usable. So when you're rolling the green stuff out, you want it nice and thin, maybe a mil, maybe two tops. And then once you've got the sausage to whatever length you want, you've got to just sort of gauge it for how the barrel. Get some sort of round implement, whether that be, like I'm using here, a file. You could use a brush, you could use a cocktail stick, whatever you want. A little bit of Vaseline on that as well, or water if you want to use water for it, although I prefer Vaseline, just to stop it sticking. Start in the middle of the roll to one end, back to the middle, roll to the other, and it flattens it out into what should be a flat sort of rectangle of green stuff. Now you see what I'm doing is I'm stretching the green stuff. Now another advantage of leaving it for an hour or so is that it's a little bit stronger, a little bit tougher, and you can do things like stretch it out. Now that makes it a little bit more consistent in size. It also gives you a bit more length to play with, and it thins it out a little bit if you've gone a bit too thick. So you don't have to do that side of it, but I just find can be easy to do. Now what I'm doing here is I'm cutting off either end, partly because they weren't straight, and I want the wrap to look straight when it's on the model. But the other side is that to obviously squeeze the end slightly, and you're pushing the end down with your knife. So I'm just taking off the bits that have had texture kind of put on or a bit of damage. Now putting the wrap on the model is dead easy. I always put one end underneath the gun, and then it's a simple case, literally, as it's in the name, of wrapping it around the gun where you're happy. Now you can do this with milli put quite easily. It's easier with green stuff. You can do this with green stuff that's not been cured for an hour, but it's a lot easier doing it with green stuff that's been cured for a little bit over an hour, because then when you're moving it round the gun, it doesn't stick to itself instantly, so you can play with it. You'll see I'm going off camera here a few times, and I'm messing about where it is and just changing how it's folded across itself, cutting a little bit off there as in the bottom, and I play with this for a minute or so just to get it exactly how I want it. So and you wouldn't be able to do this with fresh green stuff. You wouldn't be able to do this with milli put. When I've tried this, it does stick to itself a bit too readily. So best thing to do, like I said, green stuff's been cured for an hour or so, and crack on. And don't be afraid to play with where you're positioning it, just until you're happy. There's no wrong way of positioning this stuff, because again, I think in reality you use a barrel wrap to stick on bits of camouflage and whatever. In the 41st millennium we use barrel wraps because they look cool. No other reason. They're just nice looking pieces of thing to go on. So play until you're happy. You can tuck the ends under, you can knock them over, you can have it a double width wrap, you can spread it out with big gaps on the model, however you want. And I'm going to do another one after I've shown this to show you what I do. So I've worked on this one, and then happy with what it's looking like, and then go back with the knife again. That's had a bit of Vaseline put on it just so it doesn't stick, and putting a couple of little nicks into the straps themselves just to put a bit of visual interest in there, make it not look like it's fresh clean leather. So there you go, that's one done. So working on a second one now, same process, nothing different, starting fresh from the thin strip of green stuff. And again, you could, if you want, I suppose, do a 9-inch bit of the green stuff, and you just have to roll it once, and then you can do all your models with it. But it's not exactly a long process. You see in the background here, I'm rattling through this in a couple of minutes for each one. So quite easy, quite fun to do. This isn't something I've done for a number of years. I think the last time I did this was back in 2004-5 maybe. I did a Space Wolf army, and I went crazy for converting them. I did fur on them all, I did whatever. So this is not new techniques. It's quite old. I got shown this by one of the studio guys, I think, because I used to work for Workshop. Did a couple of weeks down there as part of my job, and got shown, you know, how to do fur, how to do barrel wraps. And to be honest, doing this channel has inspired me to do some of these things that I've not done for a number of years. I had a conversation with one of the guys that I game with, who was WhatsApping the other day, said, "You've not done conversions like this for years," and I haven't. So actually doing this kind of channel has inspired my hobby, and it's starting to make me play a little bit more. I think for the last few years I'd have just done the basic bog standard model, maybe a couple of little tweaks, a couple of little conversions, but definitely not done this stuff. So I'm enjoying doing it. If you're enjoying doing what I'm doing, you know, keep commenting, ask the questions, ask me to do stuff. Great, because I'm enjoying this process quite a lot at the moment, which is, I suppose, the point of doing it. So yeah, nothing new with these techniques. There's probably dozens of people out there that have done it and done videos of it, but the point of my channel, I suppose, is to show how I'm what I'm doing in the hobby. So back to the point. Here we are doing it on a heavy bolter. Again, no difference, just a slightly longer strip because the physical gun is slightly wider, so you're doing a little bit more of the length, but then it's exactly the same process of getting it stuck to the gun and doing the same things to the strap in itself. So, you know, no different, just slightly different model. There you go. So now, having got to this stage, I thought, right, now it's purity seal time. So exactly the same technique with making the strip. So I've just skipped that through now because you've already seen that already. Then I've cut off what looks to be a purity seal length piece of green stuff. Now I've put a couple of nicks at the bottom, just because I think that's the bit it's going to show, and you want maybe the purity seal at the bottom to look a little bit ragged. Then it's picking it up, try and be as delicate as humanly possible. You can use your finger, you can use a tool, you can use whatever, and then placing it onto the strap. At the point you please. Now I'm sorry I got off camera on this one, but I did on most of them I've done, still learning. So placing it around where the strap is, using a bit of a tool to move it to where you want, and then what I did is just flattened off the very top of it. So one, so it sticks onto the strap, but two, this gives us a place to put the wax part of the purity seal fairly shortly. Now working on the wax part of the purity seal, what I've done now is taken the green stuff and just smoothed it very, very thin, or like a millimetre thin, onto this parchment paper. I'm using the magical insides of a ballpoint pen, and then stabbing it and making the sort of wax part into that green stuff. Now I've not pushed too hard to go right the way through, because if you go right the way through, the little green bit gets stuck up inside the pen. So just try to leave it, so then you have to use your knife and get it kind of out. Camera's not focusing over well here, but just nicked off a couple of bits that's nice and thin around the end, and you'll be left with a very thin circle of green stuff. So it's about the right size for what we need at the end of the purity seal. So you can see there my finger, so you just take it, pop it on top of the seal itself at the end, so it crosses over onto the strap and onto the seal. And again, these are quite set by now. This is an hour or so on there, so we can work with this quite easily and it won't stick to us too badly. So I'm just using the end of the file, a little bit of Vaseline on the end, and then you're literally stabbing very gently into that circle of green stuff, not going right to the edge, and you're basically now creating the recessed centre of the purity seal. And what this also is doing, because you're pushing on it, it's also sealing it onto the purity seal and onto the strap a little bit. You're putting a little bit of pressure in there. Then once you're happy with that, you will still have some residue around the edges where you sort of cut it out of the green stuff earlier. Just kind of push that back in, back under, use that to kind of merge it into the cloth or onto the seal. And it's as simple as that. I say it's as simple as that. Obviously it's a little bit fiddly, have a few goes. This one went right the first time, some of the others took 2 or 3 goes to do it. And I made a couple. I put one onto the heavy bolter there, and I put one onto one of the normal marines. And on this one here I did 2 bits of parchment on his shoulder one coming off, rather than just the one on the other piece. So there we go. I hope that was semi-instructional. Hope you enjoyed it. It's good fun to play with green stuff. Have a go. Drop some comments about how it works for yourself. So hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.